The fullback position. One of, if not the, most overlooked and underappreciated roles ever seen within the beautiful game. For a large portion of football history, the right back and left back positions were seen as some of the most unglamorous on the pitch, with the least amount of technical ability required to play. The best defenders would play at centre back, the best ball players would play at centre mid, and the best creators would play on the wing. However, in the modern game, the position hasn't been more indispensable for how many of the top teams progress the ball forward in attack and how they support their defence. With the likes of Dani Alves, Marcelo, Trent Alexander-Arnold and João Cancelo being some of their team's most instrumental players for their success over the last 20 years. It's no wonder the position has flourished in the modern era.
In my opinion, fullbacks are the most specialised position. Well, I'm a bit biased because I was a fullback in my playing days as well, but I don't think you see anywhere else on the pitch a player that has to be everywhere, up and down, throughout, attack, defence. You can say central midfielder, sure, but I don't think that it's as fast-paced as fullbacks are.
On today's episode of the evolution of the beautiful game, we're looking back on the beginnings of the fullback position and seeing how it changed over time into the position we see nowadays. Back in much of the 19th century, the origins of the sport, there wasn't really a defined position that we would call a modern day fullback. Instead, many sides just had two fullbacks as the last two people in their line of defence, essentially playing the role of the modern day centre back, with them covering opposition forwards in the middle of the field and having very little forward playing ability. Formations back then would typically consist of a 2-2-6 or even abandoning one of the fullbacks and creating a 1-2-7. Back in this era of football, the most emphasis was placed on players' individual dribbling skills. So managers played in a style to maximise the amount of dribblers on the pitch, leaving little room for players without that ability within the starting squad. It wasn't until the 1880s when William Sudwell and Tom Mitchell's Preston North End and Blackburn Rovers teams imported the Scottish style of football to the English game, where passing of the ball had bigger emphasis than dribbling, playing often in a 2-3-5. This allowed those who didn't have the dribbling abilities required by the old philosophy to flourish. So much so that in 1888, William Sudwell's Preston side won their first league title without losing a single match, becoming invincible. Following the success of Sudwell's Preston side, many other teams adopted his 2-3-5 formation and took up the passing philosophy. This system dominated the game until 1925, when the FA decided to change the offside rule, handicapping sides that had a large number of forwards by reducing the opposition players between an attacker and the goal from 3 to 2. To combat this change, then Arsenal manager Herbert Chapman was suggested by his side's captain, Charlie Butchman, to exploit this change by making the centre half be the one in charge of the offside trap rather than the fullbacks.
So I was always told as a fullback to stay slightly in front of the two centre halves, because if you're behind the centre half and the centre half then steps up to play offside, you'll be playing the centre forward on. So you need to be playing 2 to 3 yards in front of the centre halves, and it's the centre halves that determine whether players are offside or not.
Bringing one of the forwards back into the midfield and creating a 3-3-4 or the WM formation. This was the first introduction of left back and right backs, and made fullbacks more important in the offence and defensively.
Yeah, I think your responsibilities as a fullback are to stop the other team's winger from playing. So your first job is to play defensively, and if you can get forward and support your forward players, and obviously that's a benefit.
It took a while for this formation to become successful, but by 1933 Arsenal had won their first league title after contending closely for many years. This success led many other teams to pick up this formation, and by 1935 almost every side in England had adopted the WM formation as their own. This formation would stick around until the early 1950s, with one of the most dominant sides adopting this formation being Gustav Sever's 1949 to 1954 Hungary side, which was the first to deploy fullbacks Lantos and Brzezinski to make overlapping runs to create an abundance of width. This would stretch opposing centre backs and leave inside forwards like Ferenc Puskás to exploit the exposed space. Later in the 1950s, another centre-back was introduced into the formations, forming the first four at the back systems and making the fullbacks push out even wider. Teams often lined up in the 4-2-4, with the most famous side to do this being Vicente Fiola's 1958 World Cup winning Brazil side. With Nelton Santos on the left and Dilma Santos on the right, Viola instructed them to charge forward, making overlapping ones, while Zagallo would drop into the midfield, creating space for them to bomb forward and support the attack, led by Pele, Villa and Garrincha. This wreaked havoc on the competition, with the side scoring 16 goals in 6 games. The attacking fullback was a revolution within the sport, masterminded by Sebes but perfected by Viola. In the latter years of the century, many other fullbacks continued this newly discovered attacking style within their game. In the 1960s, Inter Milan fullback Gianfranco Fischetti was instrumental in winning 3 Serie A titles and 2 European Cups for the side. The Inter side, managed by Argentinian Helenio Herrera, would line up in a 5-3-2 with a sweeper behind the main back four. Once the side would regain possession, Fischetti would bomb forward down the wing into the final third to aid the counter-attack. The left back would go on to score 75 goals in 629 appearances for the Nerazzurri, but he also didn't skip out on his defensive duties, with him single-handedly shutting down opposition attacks by coming in more narrow. This included a man-of-the-match performance in the 1964 European Cup final against a star-studded Real Madrid side with the likes of Ferenc Puskás and Alfredo Di Stefano. In the 1970s, players like Brazilian Carlos Alberto, Irishman Tony Dunn, and German Bertie Vogts were some of the most dominant in that area at the fullback position. Carlos Alberto and Bertie Vogts were more in an attacking style of fullbacks, whilst Tony Dunn was a pure defensive operator, which was still how the majority of fullbacks played at this time.
Primarily when I started, a fullback was quite simply defend first and foremost in a back four, stop the other team from getting forward, stop their winger, and if you can get forward, try and get forward and support the team in that way, but be mindful of your position.
This era was the first to show how a fullback can be deployed tactically to suit different strengths, within formations like a 4-4-2 or 5-4-1 being suited for defensive fullbacks, whilst a 4-3-3 and a 5-3-2 were suited for more attacking fullbacks. In the 1980s, players like Paolo Maldini, Andreas Brem and Giuseppe Bergami furthered this notion of fullbacks being played in defensive style, whilst a few had attacking threes.
There was Alan Kennedy, who played as a left back in the early 80s and was part of the team that won European Cup quite a number of times. So I used to watch him play, and he used to get forward quite a little bit, but he was pretty much in a back four.
Andreas Brem was also one of the first examples of a wing back.
When you play as a wing back, there's no one else on that side really, so the majority of the play and the width is created by yourself, but if you're looking to play, more often than not you have to play inside because you don't have that option of playing out wide to a winger.
Most fullbacks in the 80s were defined as players not strong enough to play centre back and not skillful enough to play on the wing, limiting the number of sides that deployed attacking options. Heading into the 1990s, attacking fullbacks and wingbacks was still a rare sight, but that was all about to change. Many managers began to deploy their squads in 3-5-2 or in a 5-3-2 formation, which allowed fullbacks to push up higher along the wings and manage their channels whilst having more support centrally.
When you play wing back, you've got that sort of added support of 3 defenders behind you, so you can sometimes almost, depending on who you're playing against, you can obviously let a player go, but if your team's got a lot of the ball, you end up playing a little bit more forward. If your team hasn't got as much of the ball, you end up playing a little bit more defensively.
The first manager to bring this style of playing to the English game was Arsene Wenger when he joined Arsenal in 1996. He set his squad up in a 5-3-2 and instructed fullbacks Lee Dixon and Nigel Winterburn to get forward at the same time, something that would never happen under previous coach George Graham. When Wenger came, we were given more license to get forward and told to quickly get high and wide. Suddenly, Lee and I were tasked with both getting forward at the same time. Previously, if he went forward, I stayed back. Even though Dixon and Winterburn helped Wenger lead Arsenal to the 1997-98 Premier League title, they weren't able to fulfill fill the position to Wenger's desired effect. For his system to work, he would need someone who was immensely quick, had brilliant crossing, and the intensity to play 90 minutes without breaking a sweat. Luckily for him, in 1999, a youngster by the name of Ashley Cole broke through the Arsenal youth ranks and had the exact profile Wenger was looking for. Cole would bombard the opposition wings and link up well with his teammates on the wing or in the midfield, whilst having the insane speed and defensive ability to recover from counter-attack and stop them with ease, being one of the hardest players for opposition wingers to get past. Going into a 4-4-2 formation, Cole formed a potent partnership with flank partner Robert Perez, as the Gunners went on to win the 2001-02 season and go invincible into 2003-04 season. Many sides in the English game began to adopt this attacking fullback/wingback system across the late 90s and early 2000s, but the best fullback partnership in the 90s and early 2000s was Roberto Carlos and Cafu for Brazil, who both had the pace and ball playing abilities of wingers, but defensive work rate and stamina to get back constantly.
I was fortunate enough to play for Wales against Brazil. He actually came off. I came on as a substitute and he came off as I came on, so I didn't actually get a chance to play against him, but he was the complete fullback. He would thrive in the modern game. He loved to get forward, he loved to create for other people, but he could also defend, and when you've won the World Cup 2 or 3 times, then I think he quite rightly goes down as one of the best.
So I'm 26.
Yeah.
I think I would probably say Roberto Carlos. Probably around, I sort of started getting into football around when he was getting up there in age, about to end off his Real Madrid career, I believe. So I'm talking around 2006, 5-6-ish. And even at that age, probably around 33, I think he was so good, so strong, so powerful, lost a bit of pace.
Being deployed in a 4-2-2 system at the 1998 World Cup, where Brazil would finish runners-up. It was 2002 which saw them shine, with them being played as wing-backs in a 5-3-2. They were instructed to bomb forward at the same time in attack, with midfielder Gilberto Silva dropping back. They essentially became the size attacking wingers and provided deadly attacks for the squad. The two combined for 3 goals over the 7 games played during the tournament, including Roberto Carlos scoring a free kick versus China, as Brazil went on to lift the World Cup.
I want to sound like Roy Keane, but Dennis Owen. Like, I think he was a modern fullback before what we now see as modern fullbacks. You know, someone that just did everything, was so solid everywhere. I actually haven't made a video on him yet, but yeah, and I've definitely read a lot about him, seen a lot of clips as well. He was before my time, to be fair, so I never watched him live.
This takes us to the modern day game and how fullbacks have become the tactical epicenter for top sides in the world. The demands for the fullbacks in the modern era are second to none. Since the commencement of the 21st century, managers like Pep Guardiola, Jose Mourinho, Jurgen Klopp and Antonio Conte have followed this model of inverted or overlapping fullbacks within their squads.
I think Simeone as well did a very, I haven't watched Atletico much this season, to be fair, but last season, especially with Lodi and Kieran Trippier, they were, especially with how he used Trippier, I was very impressed. Like, because he's not, you wouldn't look at him and be like, he can go abroad and do what he did, but he definitely used all of his passing skills. He's not the most mobile fullback. He can still get up there, I guess, but yeah, Simeone did a very good job. And again, I haven't seen him much this season. I know they've dipped a little bit, but yeah, Klopp and Simeone I would give big shots to.
Offensive fullbacks within the modern era have to be all-rounded. They have to cover a ton of ground by bombarding up and down the pitch in an effort to create more attacking opportunities. This means modern fullbacks have to be some of the most physically gifted players on the pitch to keep up this pace for a whole 90 minutes. They also have to have great link-up plays with their forwards and midfielders, whilst also being confident enough to try dribbles and game-breaking passes whilst they're on the ball. These changes to the demands of the fullback position hadn't come out of nowhere. There was a purpose for them. It was to do with how the modern day winger position had also changed from being a more creator heavy role to a goal scoring role.
I think nowadays a fullback is predominantly the winger in the team, and he's there to try and create width. So the wide players, a lot of teams, if you look at Liverpool, they play with a right-footed player on the left and a left-footed player on the right, so those players have to come inside more often than not, and then that's why, for example, Trent Alexander-Arnold is able to get wide because Mo Salah comes inside a little bit, and the same on the other side. Robertson gets forward a lot more because Mane comes inside, and then what they do to counterbalance that is they have a holding midfield player like Fabinho who just sits there.
This is now the norm, with players like Mo Salah, Raheem Sterling and Son Heung-min being the primary goal scorers for their sides. It leaves their flank partners to do their creative work within their absence. There isn't a blunter side that does this more than Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool team.
So, the highest profile one, Liverpool, right? Trent Alexander-Arnold, he's basically a midfielder at this point. The way that they work is they just have Henderson or Fabinho slot in at the right to cover for any mistake that he might make. Same with Chelsea and Alonso. Kante will go left back.
With Trent Alexander-Arnold on the right and Andy Robertson on the left, the two are the side's primary creative output. Across all competitions this season, Trent Alexander-Arnold has 18 assists and 2 goals, whilst Andy Robertson has 14 assists and 2 goals. Between the two of them, they've contributed to just over 40% of Liverpool's goals in the 2021-22 season, for a side looking to complete a quadruple.
In my eyes, those two are the best left back and best right back in the world, which is crazy in the same team.
With a system that caters to wingers cutting into inside positions and midfielders regaining the ball, it's no wonder both fullbacks place within the top 3 in the assist charts in the Premier League. Many other impressive fullback duos include João Cancelo and Kyle Walker at Pep Guardiola's Manchester City, and Chelsea's Ben Chilwell and Reece James. Many sides now deploy either a 4-3-2-1, a 5-3-2 or a 4-3-3 to accompany this attacking fullback play. It isn't just the giants of the sport doing this as well. Many teams in the lower half of the top division and lower tier divisions deploy attacking fullbacks now, with the likes of Brentford and Brighton being some of the primary examples of this.
I think it's just you're gonna see more Robertsons, more Robertson type players, where he's not as good offensively as Alexander-Arnold. He's not as good defensively as a Kyle Walker. He's top class, not the best at those things, but he's just a jack of all trades. Because like I say, I mean, you kind of, a fullback's expected to now be an incredible defender, an incredible attacker. They're not going to be able to be, unless they're a generational talent, not going to be able to be the best at all of them. But yeah, we're going to see more of those coming up soon. I definitely think so. I think that's the future for that. Again, that's a top level fullbacks. Like, I'm talking Champions League, Premier League winners. But there will still be space for the, traditional, less mobile fullbacks in the teams with less budgets. Width has always been a big problem because it's quite simple to defend centrally for most teams. You pack the midfield, I guess, or you deploy 4 or 5 midfielders, maybe bring in 3 at the back, but actually it's not 3 at the back, it's more like 5 at the back. So yeah, I think wide areas, you're not going to be able to get away with not having a wide defensive orientated player. Yeah, they will be very important going forward, just from a width perspective defensively.
But I think the modern game has changed quite considerably, that teams now are very much possession based and they're looking to keep the ball and make it hard for the opposition. The old sort of saying is the other team can't score if they haven't got the ball. So teams are very much possession based nowadays, and I think that has been helped along by people like Pep Guardiola, who's come across from Spain, went to Germany, sort of revolutionised it in Germany, and then he's come across to England and done the same here. And there's a lot of teams that try and play that way nowadays. Essentially, a fullback now is almost an old-fashioned winger. So I think if you look at Man City, it's very interesting that when they play and they go down one side, the fullback, rather than creating width on the far side, actually comes in and becomes like another midfield player. Kyle Walker does it really, really well. So again, it's another link player to get the ball out to the wide player on the other side. So there's subtle differences all over the pitch, you know, and with different teams, and it does depend on where you are in the league and what sort of style that your team plays. But I think you know, fullbacks are creative players, and I think they're going to be more and more creative as the game goes on.
It's an unpopular opinion, but the fullback position is the most important player in a team in the modern era of football. And with upcoming superstars like Alphonso Davies, Achraf Hakimi, Renard Lodi and Nuno Mendes coming into the mix, the position can only evolve further in the future.